Dad pointed at my plate and said, "If you don't like what's here, stop eating. You don't pay for anything anyway." My sister laughed. "You'd last a week on your own." So I left that night and canceled the grocery card that was under my name. 2 weeks later, Mom called, panicked. "The store declined us. We have nothing to eat." I smiled and let the phone keep ringing. Dad set his fork down like a judge slamming a gavel. The clack echoed across the cheap wood table. "If you don't like what's here, stop eating. You don't pay for anything anyway." Haley's laugh was bright and cruel. "You'd last a week on your own." The chandelier threw hard light at their faces. Sweat glinted on Dad's temple. Mom rubbed her hands together, eyes darting like a small animal's. Glass chimed as someone refilled Haley's wine. I pushed my plate back, metal scraping. "You think so?" I said, quiet enough that the dog in the hallway didn't bark. My voice had the kind of flat calm you only get after too many late shifts. Dad's mouth thinned. "You've always been the parasite." Haley leaned in. "Seriously, Noah, get a job that isn't part-time sympathy." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A bank email. I didn't look. I closed my eyes and took a breath, the air tasting of lemon cleaner and old arguments. Mom's whisper came like an apology and a warning. "Not here." Dad's voice rose, and then he dropped an accusation like a hand grenade. "You stole from us." Everyone turned like a single feral animal. I hadn't expected that line tonight. The room held, and then I answered nothing. The silence was the first act. "I am Noah Callan, 27. I learned to be small to make them comfortable. I learned to laugh at my own expense so no one else would have to. I am the one who left early for work, late for sleep, who covers Sunday dinners by staying late at night delivering other people's packages. They called me helpful. They called Haley gifted. They called Dad practical. They called Mom delicate. Nobody called me theirs. People picture the quiet man as someone with nothing to say. They don't see the ledger in his head, every favor counted, every temporary payment logged. I kept lists like a child keeps stamps, neat, numbered, painfully precise. Tonight I carried 2 things in my jacket, a cold folder of bank statements and the exact day I learned silence doesn't keep love, it keeps debt. I'd rehearsed one sentence for years. I hadn't planned to use it tonight, but the accusation put it on the table. The family and fast cuts, Richard, Dad. 52, a throat-weathered laugh, suits that sag where dignity once lived. He runs his mouth like a faucet, never clean, Elaine, Mom. 50, hands that used to make quilts. Now her hands fold into each other, smoothing words into apologies. She smells faintly of lavender and worry. Haley, 24, glossy hair, a laugh that clips like scissors. She loves nights out and posts pictures of beaches she never bought. She believes charisma excuses everything. Marcus, Haley's husband, late 20s, league of cheap compliments, pockets empty of consequence. He says he supports her ambitions but never writes the checks for them. They move through the dinner like a chorus that had rehearsed the script of me being less. Haley interrupted, cut across my lines, made jokes out of my silence. Dad rolled his eyes. Mom's face kept changing. Hope, guilt, resignation. When a plate slid off the table and clattered to the floor, not an accident but a well-aimed shatter, Haley laughed and said, "Nice cleanup, Noah," as if the mess was my job. I thought of the nights I'd scrubbed their floors after their parties, the way my own shoes still smelled like someone else's cologne. It started small. Transfers to cover the electric, help with a security deposit, just till next week. Those words turned into checks, then into debt consolidated under my name. Dad called it family accounting. Haley called it less stressful. Mom called me, crying, "We'll pay you back." Tonight, Haley slid a selfie across the table, the kind of picture you take when you want to prove you're fine. "The lawyer filed the transfer last month," she said casually, chewing greens. "I'm on the deed now." The air cracked. I tasted copper. My mind counted back through months, mortgage notices I'd paid, a condo fee I'd cleared, the loan Dad had forgotten. I thought of the nights I ate cereal for dinner so I could cover the late fee on the family's credit card. Dad's voice came like a creak in an old house. Your sister did what had to be done. I smiled slow. Funny, those what we had to do things were done with my account number. Haley's smile stuttered. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard a vein showed. Mom's hand went to her mouth like she swallowed a praline of panic. You think you can just say that? Dad barked. You think we don't know how to behave? You think you get to decide who's useful? Haley snapped back. We kept this house together. You kept your phone bills and my paycheck on the same line. I said it pointedly. You posted pictures of white sand while I paid for your last 2 flights. Haley scoffed. I earned my following. Mom stood up suddenly, chair scraping like a fingernail. Stop! Both of you! Her voice shook like a thin glass. She looked at me and I saw something fragile but honest. A memory of when we'd been 3, and she braided my hair without worrying how it looked on Instagram. You lied, I told her softly. You all lied. Dad's face went the color of paper. Noah, I cut him off. You put signatures on the line that weren't questioned because you knew I'd always quiet the storm. For the first time, there was fear in his eyes. Not of me, but of exposure. He tried to find his old reflex, bluster. It didn't work. The table trembled. That winter was a picture stuck to the back of my ribs. Snow rushed past the bus windows, each puff like cold punctuation. Dad called at 2 a.m, voice thick with whiskey. The bank's on us, Noah. Just wire what you can. Mom's voicemail the next morning. Please, just this once. We will make it right. I missed 2 shifts and covered the mortgage. I remember the grocery store fluorescent lights burning like interrogation lamps as I scanned cans and counted after tax dollars. I watched Haley on a story, champagne, a room with more plants than my apartment had furniture. I called my boss and lied about car trouble so I could have time to make the payment. I ate ramen for weeks while their electricity stayed on. People say sacrifice looks noble. Mostly it looks like a cheap bowl of noodles on a chipped plate. Each quiet sacrifice taught me the family ledger. My silence paid their comfort. That winter taught me something else. Favors can be repossessed if the lender decides to stop lending. I unzipped my jacket and set the folder down on the table. The paper made a soft, accusing sound. I could have kept this to myself, I said. You know why I didn't. Inside, scans of transfers, dates, emails, voicemail transcripts, evidence of accounts in my name, payments sent from my card to theirs, a chain of temporary loans that turned into a mortgage cushion for Haley's newly filed deed. Haley went pale enough to be described as translucent. Marcus stammered, This is illegal. Dad reached for the folder like he could snatch the truth back. Where did you get these? He asked, voice small. I kept records, I said. When you all decided words were flexible, I started copying the receipts. Mom choked. Noah! I looked at her, and something tender and terrible passed between us. The recognition that we were both prisoners of a system built out of excuses and their own selfish needs. I knew, I said. I knew when you started lying to yourselves. Haley's hands shook. You'll ruin us. You already burned our bridge, I said. I just lit the map so we could see the wreckage. They called me reckless. They called me cruel. They cried that they had nowhere to go. Dad tried bravado. Mom begged. Haley whispered threats that sounded like promises. Marcus tried to play the protector, I explained, calm as a ledger closing. I closed the authorized user cards that were under my name. I canceled auto payments I'd been making. I put holds on payments I was legally authorized to control. I didn't steal. I stopped funding what they'd come to think of as entitlement. You can't, Dad said. This is family. Family doesn't come with a receipt and an expiration date, I asked. You wrote that expiry. Mom's eyes filled. Noah, we'll sell the house. You already sold pieces of me to keep your lifestyle, I said. You sold my nights, my food, my future? Haley screamed. You robbed us. I folded the folder like a handkerchief and placed it on the table. I reclaimed my life. I stopped paying the cost of your choices. They looked at their phones, at the online balances that now read differently. The silence after that was a different kind, the kind that comes when the foundation of the house has been pulled out. I packed light. I packed things that smelled like me, my battered jacket, my favorite mug, a notebook full of small, angry poems I'd never intended to show anyone. I left behind the framed graduation photo Dad had once used as proof I turned out fine. Mom called every morning for a week. I let most calls go to voicemail. Sometimes I answered just to hear her breathe. Once she begged, "Come home." I said, "I did come home, Mom. It's the part where you were supposed to meet me there that's missing." Haley texted apologies that read like ads, generic, performative. Marcus sent flowers to Mom's apartment door. He wanted to be seen being kind. They put up a facade of trying to fix things for the outside world. The inside of our house was a different story. At the bus station, the cold bit my ears. The city blurred. My reflection in the glass looked thinner, older, freer. I booked a small place with a month's rent and 3 months of saving, the first time I'd budgeted for me and not to bail someone else out. The apartment smelled faintly of paint and possibility. Time stitches things differently. I worked through nights, yes, but now for a purpose that wasn't bailing out whispers. I built a small routine. Morning coffee at a corner shop where the barista learned my order, folding shirts over the back of my chair like they were small flags of victory. I learned to cook something that wasn't ramen. It tasted of normalcy. I saw them once from far away. Haley with a new man who didn't know my name. Dad at a diner pretending to read a newspaper. Mom mailed a handwritten letter that smelled of lavender and apology. I read it on my stoop, then folded it gently and let it sit. Her words tried to stitch what had been frayed, but you can't patch a sweater while it's still on the shoulders that wore it thin. I didn't hate them. Hate is loud. I felt a quieter thing. Detachment turned to a smooth, steady relief. They would have to rebuild their life now on their own merit, not on my ledger. That was punishment enough, and it was also, strangely, compassion. At night, I would open my notebook and write. Little lists that had nothing to do with them. Buy salt. Fix the cabinet. Call Marcus. No. Breathe. Peace didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived like a slow sunrise, the kind you notice only after you stop looking at the scoreboard. I learned that walking away doesn't mean never looking back. It means finally deciding which part of your life deserves you. If you were in my place, would you forgive? Or would you close the door and never open it again? Drop your answer below. Be honest. I want to know how many of you have kept a ledger in your head too. If Noah's story touched you, hit like, subscribe, and share so someone who needs to hear it won't feel alone tonight. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away. Not because you're cruel, but because you finally choose yourself.